Yeah, we're here with Frosty, and he co-produced this record, which is the second in a series. I guess it's reversed, is it? Or no, it looks reversed. Pacific Breeze, and this is, well, you can describe it, Frosty. I'll let you dive into it, because I've touched on City Pop a little bit on the channel, and I'm sure you know a lot more than I do.
One thing is, I didn't intend for it to match my shirt as well as it does. Pleasantly surprised. So I don't know if Hiroshi Nagai, who painted this, had a premonition about the clothing I was going to wear today. But happy to have any psychic connections. I'll get I feel safe around all of you, so we'll do our social distanced, intimate hangout with the Vinyl Rewind crew. Yes, the city pop world is wild. I kind of stumbled upon it by accident, as I do, most music I come across, and that was through just record digging and picking up that looked interesting to me. I founded an internet radio station called DubLab, and over the years we had a lot of opportunities to visit Japan and to go tour out, to show films we made, to DJ, to showcase compilations and various things, art projects. And on these trips I'd always go hit the record stores and sometimes fly blind. I don't speak Japanese, read Japanese. I just kind of was finding things that looked intriguing, and some of the city pop records were really kind of popping out to me, especially things that Hiroshi Nagai designed, or Peter Sato, or various kind of artists were designing these beautiful covers, but also these sort of almost contemporary, cosmopolitan, cool characters who were popping off of covers. There are some, there's some photos inside. You can see some of the images. So, there's interesting artwork, and a lot of times it was just, pulling these out of bins and hoping for the best. And the period that I was doing a lot of the shopping over there, this was, I'd say, really out of vogue within Japan, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot as a record collector, is when traveling places to try to find the music that is underappreciated in that country, or even in your own country, and kind of find the music. You're kind of out of phase with public opinion in a way, but it's a good time to be able to explore and to do a little deep investigation, and also ask the questions, why something that was wildly popular is no longer, embraced. And then these things also are all cyclical. Anything that is kind of out of vogue at a point might swing back into fashion. And I wasn't doing it with the idea or the hope that it was to swing back into fashion. I was just into the records. And so over the years was just kind of pulling these records. And in record nerd circles, there's overlapping, and there's these kind of shared loves, of people into micro genres and these niches, at the same time. And this was a sound that a few DubLab DJs and friends were really getting into around the same time, and we had a shared affinity for this music. So my buddy Zach Cowley, Andy Kabik, Van Vetiver, and various other friends. And so we were just connecting over this music, and Light in the Attic was enthusiastic about it as well. And so we decided to jump into the venture and share the music.
Nice. Sorry. It's hard. It's crazy doing a live stream. I think I'm stretching the bandwidth. Do you know how to flip? Does anyone know how to flip my screen so it doesn't look reversed? That's the thing I don't understand how to do.
I'm not sure. Things look reversed for me as well, but your side looks the right way to me. So
that's weird. Yeah, so I'm using I'm actually on the stream. It's my computer screen being streamed, so that's why. Okay, that's weird. I've never used Zoom before, so.
Yeah.
But
hey, we're blasting off new territory.
So yeah, so the record that's playing right now, someone just asked. It's the record we're talking about, the Pacific Breeze 2, which Frosty co-produced and essentially curated. Am I not? That's correct, right?
I mean, I think it would be interchangeable. I mean,
Okay.
usually, the series, and this is the first part of the series.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Moving into a lot of deep cuts that, and some not even deep cuts, some cuts that were really popular at a moment, and then again, kind of slipped into obscurity, and now kind of bringing back. Yeah, that's one of the nice touches.
I love that. So it's like the lining of a suit. It's so great. Who remind me again who did the overall packaging art design?
So the layout was a guy named Daryl Norson, who's done a lot of work for Light in the Attic, as well as the Grateful Dead estate, as well as Smithsonian Folkways and various folks. But he's a great designer who did layout. The original artwork is an artist named Hiroshi Nagai,
Okay.
and a lot of this, is really for us. Pacific Breeze. I mean, the name says a lot in that it's a conversation between Tokyo and Los Angeles, or Japan and California, but more specifically Los Angeles, and the fact that a lot of the musicians at this time in Japan, they had access because of this great sort of economic boom that was happening in Japan in the 70s and 80s. They had a huge export of electronics that were happening around the world, manufacturing export of electronics, automobiles, and so the country was booming. I mean, everybody was doing really well, and out of this prosperity came this kind of supportive culture, or the kind of exploration of recording. So these great studios were being born, both home studios and kind of professional recording studios with this top-notch electronic gear. But the musicians were also looking outside of Japan, and this happens around the world, people kind of looking outside of their own backyard and then kind of aiming to reflect whatever that sound that they're hearing from across an ocean or across a country, and put their own twist on it. So a lot of these artists were digging a lot of what was happening in Los Angeles, both on the early side in the 70s and 60s, bands like Little Feat and that kind of Topanga Canyon rock scene, the work that Van Dyke Parks was doing, but then also a lot of the kind of funk and boogie that was happening in so they were mirroring that and kind of aiming for that, but doing it in their own way, or doing it with Japanese lyrics. And so a lot of the music was, if it was popular in Japan, and a lot of that because of language barriers. So it was music that was really for the domestic market, as opposed to being for export. So a lot of it didn't get outside of Japan. So this was our effort to share music that wasn't really heard outside of Japan until YouTube came along, and suddenly you were starting to hear these kind of songs pop up on YouTube. And really,
wow. Yeah, and then I guess my first sort of like inkling about it was the connection with vaporwave, and that movement, and how they were taking some of these and so stretching them out, and that sort of a thing. And it's just been a really cool learning experience, just diving down this. And my very first record I got from Mr. Goodboy, and it was the soundtrack to Chips. And it's a really cool, kind of like this, like kind of funky. Good time. So if you could go into a little bit about the process of getting a comp like this put, I guess let's focus on the first one, because that one I'm sure took longer through all the legalities and all that sort of thing, the rights management. Can you talk about, like, when you, Was it your idea? Was it a collaborative idea?
Collaborative idea, and there was a greater kind of idea with Light in the Attic of doing a Japanese reissue series. So there's Harumi Hosono's music, Hiroshi Yoshimura. There's also the Kankyo Ongaku comp that was more ambient, environmental kind of music that came out of Japan.
Okay.
It was also for Grammy, which was great as Best Historical Recording. So it's this larger kind of series, but this was one part of the series that was an important story, Japanese music story, that again started to seep out. And the vaporwave kind of sound was that, in large part, that's how people started to get a doorway into city pop, sometimes not even really knowing kind of what the source was, but
yeah,
sometimes discovering. I mean, Plastic Love was a song that really kind of made it through the vaporwave circles. And what happened is, YouTube and the way the YouTube algorithms work, have kind of famously helped the resurgence of Japanese music, because a lot of this music was, again, streaming wise, only available on YouTube, or it was available physically, but you had to go to Japan, or you had to buy it on Discogs or eBay for a lot of money. But a lot of that was due to the licensing. A lot of the Japanese labels were either major labels and are major labels, Sony, Columbia, etc. And these kind of labels often, you're not just talking about the music arm, you're talking about, a company that was making VHS players, TVs, microwave ovens, all sorts of kind of domestic electronics, as well as releasing music. But sometimes the music part of it was kind of hidden, in some side office. I just, in my imagination, I'm thinking of, some factory where they're making vacuum cleaners and, and cars, but somewhere off to the side, like in the film Brazil, there's some guy like in some weird sub office. But I think that, we and Yosuke Kitazawa, who did a lot of the groundwork, legwork for Light in the Attic, just put a lot of time and energy into having these conversations. In Japan, the way that things work business-wise, it's very much its own culture of business, and there's an etiquette that goes into Japanese business. Business meetings, when you go to the business meeting and you get the presentation of the name card, the business card, and you hold it and you admire it and you ponder the business card for a while. And you don't just set it off to the side, and when you finally do set it down, you set the business card on the table in front of you in a kind of a position of honor where you're still regarding this business card, and you're served tea and you're served. It's very much an etiquette that goes into these meetings, and things don't move fast. They're usually conversations that last a while. When you talk about conversations and face-to-face conversations, and this is an ocean away from where the label is, and so the FaceTime doesn't happen back to back. It's sometimes spread out throughout months. So a lot of the conversations took a long time, and a lot of even the small labels that were releasing music that might have been kind of vanity labels or imprints were really part of larger label groups. So even smaller labels, in the end, a lot of them were part of kind of larger groups. So it took a long time, and it's a process. But that's why it's until now, it took until now for a lot of this kind of Japanese reissue material to start making its way out, because the conversation is long.
Was there ever a sense from the Japanese perspective, like why do you care, or why do you want this old music? Was that ever part?
There's some of that. I think some of it is, or some of it's the reverse, where once people are interested, well, maybe we'll release it on our own. And so some on a project, release it, but often that release never materializes, and so it doesn't really give anyone any good. It just sort of sits there in limbo for a long time. And I think that happens a lot throughout the world with music reissues. They're slowed down by the reality of what it takes to release something and put the care into it. But in general, we're lucky to have the support we did, and some of it came through various side channels. For instance, a friend, Hiro Murai, filmmaker, who I think you might know.
Yeah.
So Hiro, I was searching for Kuni Murai, who started a label called Alpha Records that released Yellow Magic Orchestra, released various things in that world, and he also co-founded Yin Records with Hosono and Takahashi from Yellow Magic Orchestra. That was a sub-label. So I was searching for him, trying to figure out a kind of a lead to see if we could get some sort of, lead into his world. And I see a photo on the internet, and it's Kuni Murai next to Hiro Murai. And so I send Hiro say, do you have any connection to Kuni Murai? Is this a coincidence? He said, no coincidence. It's my dad.
Oh, wow.
So connected, and Kuni Murai helped us. He helped us really kind of get a lot of what we needed. And although he's not directly involved with the labels now as they exist, he's the founder, and so he's the godfather of those labels.
Yeah.
And he'll pave the way. So sometimes things come in unexpected forms, and they come through, investigation, searching, and digging.
Yeah. Were there songs that you couldn't get?
Yeah. So one of the most iconic city pop artists.
Oh, here we go. The collection comes out.
There's some. I've got more back there, but
yeah.
So he's very very iconic, but he is not licensed any of his music for reissue.
Oh, okay.
And so we haven't seen. There he is, looking cool back there in the middle photo. So unfortunately, we were not able to get any Tatsuya Mashita music, and so that's sort of, in a way, a glaring omission, but not by any kind of fault of ours. It's just that he hasn't licensed his music, and he sort of shuns the genre. But any genre really is, unless it's an artist who's creating it, it's usually a construct of journalism or record store, the labels kind of marketing department, rather than the artists themselves. Artists don't like to be in boxes. They like to kind of be free of those kind of constraints. So with this genre, like a lot of others, people say, well, not really, I don't want to be lumped into city pop. Others are kinder with the history, but it's good to acknowledge that these things genres aren't real, and these connections sometimes are a little tenuous, but we're more into the vibe grouping, grouping things together, and the glue binds is the vibe itself, and so for us it's sort of shaping something around a vibe. And that's why also having a subtitle, and in this case, pop AOR, boogie.
Yeah, I think that's pretty apt. Definitely. I'm just going through the chat real quick, see if there's any questions, if we have any from the audience. Lot of recommends, so that's good. People are putting down some of their favorite artists down there. One thing I found fascinating too is the connection of like video game composers that were just, because at one point this was just what was on the radio, and so some were taking inspiration from Metallica, Megadeth, but also from this angle, and you can find like almost note for note examples in like Mario Brothers and stuff, and that connection really fascinates me too, because it's like, even though it's chiptune, you can, I mean, as a child, it was always just, that's what it is. It's the theme for Mario. But then as I get older, I start to hear like, oh, I see what they were trying to do with the limitations of the technology. So it's just, I don't really have a point other than I love all the different connections that you make as you keep going down these paths. Because I think I lived 37 years without knowing what city pop was, and all of a sudden it's like a whole new window. And unfortunately, it is a little difficult. Well, maybe it's easier in California, but it is difficult on a whole to really find this stuff physically in a physical format. So,
the video game, and again, we're talking about a lot of the early video game technology, a lot of the programming, a lot of it was coming out of Japan, and so that was part and parcel of this sort of economic boom. And what was happening is that is one culture that was breaking out of Japan. The music culture wasn't really. It was sort of really within Japan. Yeah. But video games maybe had more of a universality to them because it didn't rely upon, if there was a story, it wasn't really dialogue driven. It was more action driven. And so the music was this kind of background music that was part of the soundtrack of the game and driving that forward. But you had a lot of shared artists, and many of the artists in the city pop world were also making a lot of music for TV commercials, jingles, also crossed over to environmental music for department stores and various kind of spaces. So there was really this idea of music as kind of an elevator of atmosphere, like to be able to stimulate through the atmosphere. So you're hearing the same people who are composing or who are, the session musicians for some of these city pop songs were composing, music for video games. They were making music for, again, department stores or, air conditioners. There's a crossover, and there's a lot of opportunity for artists. I mean, artists were getting paid to be artists and to do a number of things. So there was a lot of stuff that was kind of in the air at that time. But I think the city pop stuff, more the video games were really the artists kind of dreaming these worlds. These were video games were kind of their own sort of constructed worlds. These songs were more mirrors of, again, like maybe more mirrors of American, pop, disco, funk, etc. And so it's almost like creating their own versions, heartfelt versions of things that existed and putting their own flip on it. But you heard the kind of periphery of the synthesizers and the early computer programming that was going into it. And so this compilation, the second part of the series, has a little more of that vibe. And I hear in the last song on the Yuji Toriyama Bay Sky Provincetown is such a dreamer kind of cut. You hear a lot of just kind of a world of flotation. But yeah, it's very evocative, and even if they were going for kind of a straight pop cut, it was sort of a pop tune kind of wrapped in a vibey atmosphere that was very Japanese.
Yeah, I'm vibing out right now. Well, this last song, let's see, this is I'm in Love, track 4, side B.
That's a good one. And so this one, in a way, is sort of like, we sort of intentionally cover-wise too, but in a way, Pacific Breeze 2 was sort of the nighttime companion to the daytime. This was a little sunnier, a little more beach vibe, and this one is a little more kind of, nighttime city drop kind of vibe. And so
that's what I'm picturing. Top down in my Miata. Cassette player booming. Yeah.
You're trying to reflect that a bit more in the vibe of the songs. It was a little more of that kind of slicker kind of nighttime gloss. but I still haven't cracked the code on all of this stuff. I'm still exploring myself, and that's kind of what gives me joy in all of this music, is that it's continuing to reveal things.
Yeah.
The artist kind of lived so many different lives in a way, and it was a continuation. Some of the artists had been part of very distinct Japanese kind of, movements, music movements from earlier decades, but were continuing and doing their thing. And some of them are still, kind of reaching their peak of fame right now. For instance, Horumi Hosono or his colleagues from Yellow Magic Orchestra are arguably more popular now than they were before. So it's an interesting kind of moment for Japanese music.
Yeah. Did you ever... There's this movie... I'm just thinking of it. I think it was a Tony Scott movie with Michael Douglas. I think it was called Black Rain. And he goes to Japan. And they actually went to Japan to shoot it. And it's like late 80s Japan. And it's like the soundtrack's nothing like City Pop, but I'm having those images. You should watch it, because like the scenery you get of Tokyo of that time with the cars with all these lights on them and stuff is pretty cool. I'm sure there's better examples out there that the chat can probably tell me about.
I mean, you get even in Ridley Scott's and Blade Runner, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, but it's almost Los Angeles borrowing from Tokyo. And there's so much of that conversation happening, and a connection. I live in a home that's a Japanese American home with a lot of history in it. In Los Angeles, there's a lot of deep Japanese history, and some of it sad with internment camps, and some of it really beautiful culture that was about this kind of coexistence of space. And so outside of Hawaii, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Los Angeles, those are really, and San Francisco, but there's these kind of hubs of Japanese kind of culture outside of Japan. And Los Angeles, because we also have the film industry, there was this sort of projection of Japanese culture through the film industry, some of it bad and stereotypical and cringeworthy now, but some of it sort of striving for the right sort of tone and dreaming for something that was a little more accurate. So it's all about this conversation between cross-cultural conversation. To me, that's kind of the thing that drives me with any music exploration, is just like food, music is sort of, it's a real direct window into the soul of a culture where people are coming from. But it can be a bit of, the kind of fun house mirror thing, where it's not always, a linear sort of view. It's I think a direct view into the culture, but it goes through twists and turns because everybody is influenced by the echoes of something else, and so Japanese culture, it's influenced by outside media, and in this case it's Los Angeles and Japan Tokyo coming together to have a conversation. So it's fascinating to me.
Who's the gentleman who had an album in the 80s? I think it was called Neo Geo, and I think he was part of Yellow Magic Orchestra.
There's this new romantic that's Yukihiro Takahashi, but there's probably
because I feel like some of these artists did have some crossover in the 80s, sort of latched onto the new age scene.
Oh yeah, there's definitely new age, and there's people like this is Yasuka. His album called Jomon Show. There's actually Yasuka, who's on the Kankyo Ongaku Comp, the new age environmental comp on Light and Attic. But both Yasuka and his collaborator Kitaro were really popular in the new age scene, but there's a lot of kind of new age examples. But there's Tomita was a really formative, doing a lot of kind of
That's the guy.
so sort of like Wendy
Yeah.
Carp
Yeah.
synthesis versions of classical albums. Isao Tomita, um, and the sort of fourth unofficial member of Yellow Magic Orchestra, Hideki. I always mess up his name. Matsukate. He had a group called Logic System, and he was a computer programmer on these, ancient, big, really had to program the kind of computers. But he worked with Isao Tomita as a programmer, but also had his own side projects. And so that music Logic System is interesting. And he came to Los Angeles to record a Logic System album called Venus with a lot of LA session musicians, just as Hosono's band, The Happy End, came to LA to record with Little Feat and Van Dyke Park. So not only was there sort of an admiration, but some of the bands were coming to record their records in LA in the studios here to get that Burbank sound, as they would say.
It's coming full circle at that point. Sounds like. This is the record. I mean, Tomita's great too, but this is the record I was thinking of. I don't know if you know that.
Is Sakamoto?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sakamoto, yes, Hiromi Hosono, Ryuichi Sakamoto, and Yukihiro Takahashi. The three main members of the three members of the Yellow Magic Orchestra. But then there's little tendrils and collaborators. But David Sylvian from the band Japan and various things did a lot of collaborations. So as an example, of a non-Japanese musician doing a lot of kind of work with the Japanese musicians. But Sakamoto then moved into doing a lot of film scoring. So Goodbye, Mr. Lawrence. Goodbye, Mr. Lawrence. With David Bowie starring in it. So they were friends. They did work together. But there was a moment where Yellow Magic Orchestra was the band broke out of Japan, and started to kind of gain an international.
Yeah, because I have some U.S. pressings of them in my collection. My collection is very small. It's probably like 2 records.
We're focused on vinyl here on this lovely program, but there's also, it's music exists in so many forms. It should be accessible, and it's wonderful to have music at your fingertips. That you don't have to have physically, but it is also nice to bring these things in your life that you can really ponder and consider in a deeper form, and really enjoy that kind of visceral nature of it. But there's so much Japanese music I don't own, and partially now there's such a boom of it, and I hate to think like that we've been part of that resurgence, so the prices have gotten like subverting this, trying to make things as accessible as possible, so that you don't have to spend
right.
$2 on a record.
You kind of cut out, but I think you were saying that city pop record collecting has really become more popular, and thus the prices have gone up because there's not a lot stateside. You got to import them, and then, or if you don't, there's a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. Yeah.
So this song, Tokyo Taste, I guess everybody right now wants a little Tokyo Taste, so that's why the prices are going up. But this is a band that Yukihiro Takahashi from Yellow Magic Orchestra was part of prior. So you see a lot of Sakamoto, you see a lot of Hosono, you see a lot of Takahashi, a lot of the were part of various side projects.
Got it. Okay. I was gonna see if there was anything else. Yeah. That's what I was gonna ask you. Yeah. Do you have a favorite album, or yeah, let's start with that favorite album, city pop specific.
I would say, I mean, one that I come back to a lot. It's weird because I wouldn't call it city pop specific, although we did put a song on the first comp from it, and that's Horumi Hosono's Phil Harmony album. And
Okay.
to me, that one is just, it's incredible because you get moments that are poppy, but you get moments that are really avant-garde and you know, more kind of experimental tape music, and then you get synthesized music, and
Oh, that sounds fun.
so that one really bridges a lot of for me. I love that. I think that you know, there's some Tatsuro Yamashita records that we weren't able to license that I love, but I love some of the CBS Sound Image series, and we took a song for the first comp, and it was a song from the Pacific compilation, but there's this whole series of sort of almost like library music records, you know, that were more kind of creating these evocative worlds of the Aegean Islands, or various kind of, they had different themes, and we licensed a couple of those, but I love, Sunbathing came from one of those. I think we did one on this. I get them all mixed up now. We're actually, we haven't officially announced it, but there's a third, sort of a cousin of this record that's coming out in August on Light in the Attic. So they're all sort of crossing in my mind.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I love the Pacific album, and there's the Yellow Magic Orchestra band was part of that. They're really the blueprint of that. I also love things that are sort of on the edge. Like, this is one of my favorite groups, Dip in the Pool, and you're starting to see more of their work.
Dip in the Pool? That's the name of the... That's great.
Actually, the next project has one of their tunes. This is a band that's a little more in the kind of new wavy vibe, called Melon, and
Wow.
this is one of my favorites. And it's sort of like a more synth pop kind of new wave project. So that's been one of my favorite records. I love this. The tune from this is on the first one, Jolly Jive. And to me, this is one of my favorite, very topical city pop. So Masayoshi Takanaka was an example of he was a guitarist who was part of these kind of older rock scenes in Japan, who was able to kind of shift identity through the decades and have a career that spanned many decades. One of my favorite other Japanese artists, and why am I just missing on her in here? Aki. But there she is.
We got a question here from Charles. Have you ever heard of a band called P Model?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He describes it as very quirky Devo kind of vibe.
Yeah. So that's where like Melon kind of resides in that world, and there's also a band called Plastics. It was very much in that world as well, and you get little bits of that in Sandy and the Sunsets. There's a little vibe of that. There's also a band called Hikashu that's great, that did a cover of The Model by Kraftwerk, and I think they might have did a Whippet. They might have done a Devo cover, but they did a cover of Kraftwerk's The Model. That's so good. But yeah, that's Hikashu. Yeah, there's so many different kind of subgenres and sounds.
Sorry, we're getting off topic questions. I don't know if I'm going to review Queen's The Miracle. Do you know that record? Yeah, I'm not familiar with the name. I probably have seen the image. I just don't know what that is. Yeah, anything else you want to touch on about maybe specifically this release or the whole, maybe the series? Now we're getting a third one possibly.
Yeah,
that's cool.
One would be a different vibe, but kind of equally in this world. I mean, I think what is interesting for me is sort of following the threads, the kind of in not only Japanese music and city pop, but kind of so many music forms around the world, that music is all part of a continuum. You know, it's all a conversation. Yep. No art is created in a vacuum. Right. You know, and there's this idea of this, you know, the artist as a kind of a singular genius who goes into their cocoon and comes out as, you know, the beautiful butterfly. And I think that there are works of art, you know, John Coltrane's The Love Supreme, there's 4 days through meditation and folks are just a masterpiece. So I think that masterpiece that can be created by a lot of kind of concentrated effort. But I think that it's influenced by your life experience. It's influenced by what else you've heard.
Yeah.
And most artists are open, and they're people who are receptive to what's happening on the outside. And so I just would encourage people to kind of follow the tendrils of these conversations, because music is part of a continuum of Japanese music that the bands, you know, are kind of shape-shifting and doing new things at a certain moment, but they come from a history and they're going somewhere new. So I feel like, you know, the liner notes, when I wrote the liner notes for the first one, I remember Matt Sullivan, who I love dearly from that nobody reads liner notes, but I think you and I and people who are out there who are it's one of the appealing things of vinyl, that it goes below the surface level. You can enjoy it as a listen, but to have it and read about the artists and read about the story, it's important. So I would just encourage people as they listen, if the music kind of grabs you, to follow those tendrils, you know, because there's a lot of stories to be told, and that as these compilations come out and others around the world, the kind of blanks are being filled in and the stories being told for also people outside of Japan. But I think a lot of Japanese listeners are reinvestigating the past of the music there, and so that's been one of the very nice things, hearing from a lot of Japanese music fans that they're rediscovering music that's from their own culture and from their own backyard. Yeah. And so that's been really nice to see happen.
That's funny. Someone said, I think the Bee Gees were part of that city pop era, but hearing a sped up version of Staying Alive in Airplane Flying High made it look like it was going too far. I mean, in some ways, city pop was trying to emulate that. So yeah, I mean, like you said, you just touched on the whole no music's created in a vacuum. I did want to bring up, someone else asked, is there a song that sums up the genre, or maybe an album? I know like a great place to start is obviously these compilations, but if, you know, say there's a really accessible album or something that's easy to find online, to stream or whatever, where should we look?
I mean, I don't know if it's the best song from the whole...
Well, it could be a record.
Genre, but I think that it's important to listen to Plastic Love, the Maria Takeuchi, because it was something that had a big impact, and it gives, and it's a good song too. I'm not saying it's a bad song, but it's I think, you know, we didn't include that because it was so heard, but I think that it's nice to listen to that. I think to me, it's more interesting to kind of know that there's mini stories again. And we put Kimiko Kasai on this. he did this record with her. She did a record with Herbie Hancock, and so I think that the artists themselves were exploring other kind of worlds and other possibilities, but they were influenced by other things. Yellow Magic Orchestra was a huge fan of Esquivel and Martin Denny. You know, they cover Martin Denny's Firecracker, and so you have touches of exotic, touches of disco, like the Bee Gees. You have touches of kind of synth music and Wendy Carlos and film soundtracks and Van Dyke Parks and all these things floating into the music. And so it's all part of a big conversation. I would say if I was to do one of my favorite tunes from this Pacific Breeze too. I mean, starting at the beginning, Bread and Butter with Pink Shadow is the oldest tune on this comp. So we intentionally started at the beginning in a way, and this gives Light in the Attic always bookends their compilations. Expansive songs from this, and Bread and Butter is the 1972 representative. So it's interesting to hear that more kind of like groovy kind of folk rock sound that was in a way a precursor to a lot of this, but still into the vibe. I also love the Rainy Saturday and Coffee Break, Junko Ohashi and Minoyu Central Station. I think that one is amazing. But I have two human children, and I couldn't pick a favorite, and I don't want to pick a favorite of my human children, so it's hard to do it in this form. But I think plugging these things in also to YouTube and kind of seeing where the algorithm leads you, because you might discover something totally new, and to me that's all of the work that I'm interested in as a music journalist, explorer, curator, is really with the intention of setting people on a path of discovery on their own, encouraging out there. And for me, I appreciate what I know, but I value what I don't know more so, because that's what continues pushing me along as kind of a wars. I want to hear something that I haven't heard before. So constantly, there's a lot to be had in.
Someone's asking if Light in the Attic has any plans to release not like actual like reissue of City Pop albums. He's referencing Heaven Beach by, I'm gonna say these wrong, by K. Timely, a couple other ones too, Love Trip, Cologne, and Sun Shower. I'm not gonna say the artist names because I'm just gonna mess them up.
Coming out. So if they visit the site, there are a few standalone albums coming out through Light in the Attic. I would say that what's interesting also in this genre is there are albums that you get mixed results. I think there's albums that I personally like a song or two from. I'm not fond of the entire album, but I also think that's kind of what I like. I enjoy, like back in the day when you go into a bar and there's a vinyl jukebox. I enjoyed finding the gem in an otherwise sort of boring jukebox. I like searching for the kind of gems. I'm not saying that every album is like that. A lot of these albums are front to back great, but there are records that you might have one cut that's a fire cut and the rest is questionable or just a different world. But yeah, Light in the Attic is reissuing some.
Okay, so something to look forward to.
Yeah, there is more music on the way from Japan in Light in the Attic for sure.
There's have you ever heard of Magical by Junko Ohashi?
So Junko is on this comp with the Rainy Saturday and Coffee Break. I love Junko Ohashi, and so that's another artist that I'd recommend kind of diving into the wormhole with, because there's a lot to discover.
Any plans for more her music on the from Light and Attic, maybe?
That's a question I don't know, and I couldn't say.
All right. Well, I tried one. That's cool. That's great. Just curious, like, what do you have a large record collection, vinyl collection, or is it pretty tame?
No, it's bigger than it should be.
Okay.
And a good friend of mine, Carlos Nino, who's a musician, you know very well.
Yeah.
He's really the all killer, no filler sort of thing.
Yeah.
His record collection very trim, but it's the sort of thing where everything you pull out is a killer. I'm slower to let go of things, I feel, and I received a lot over the years, you know, promotional records for the radio.
Yeah.
And there's things that I keep that I don't need. So I'm trying to trim it down, but I probably have too many.
I'm actually kind of rebuilding. You can't see it, but it's on the other side of this. But I had to move my bar, but in doing that, it's a better layout now. And now the next plan is to build a couple record racks, and I sort of scoped out my design of what I want it to be, kind of based on a couple of them. And I kind of want to make the bottom, because I want it to be record store style, but tiered a little bit. So you have, you know, one row and then an upper row, and then kind of almost the same thing but down below. Take, you know, double the capacity, but I also want to be able to like pull that out so I have it on casters, basically. Yeah. So it's not so in the dark.
Also, if you've had too many drinks from your adjacent bar, you can lay on the ground and pick records, you know, instead of standing upright.
Yeah. That's the privilege of having your own bar, I guess. You get to do. Have you been to Peanut Butter Wolf's bar?
They're there a bunch, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's a cool place.
Yeah. So that whole vibe is very much, the Japanese Kisa Cafe kind of record lounge vibe. That whole culture, and the most famous internationally would be JBS in Kuga. That's Jazz, Blues, and Soul Cafe, run by Kobayashi-san. And so that's a spot that is incredible record collection, great places to drink Japanese whiskey and tea and coffee and listen to music on an incredible sound system. So I'd recommend that for folks. But I think that, you know, we're lucky that culture has spread, and so around the world there are hi-fi lounges. So once we all get past our stages of, you know, masks and staying, go back and, you know, enjoy the.
It's been so weird, man. Like, because normally I would have you come on down, because where I'm located is really close to DubLab, I believe. You're just off of Virgil, right? Yeah, I'm walking distance from there, like right by Squirrel, you know Squirrel? Yeah, so it's like...
maybe for the... We'll have...
Yeah. But normally I would do that, and then so... You know, it'd be more... But this I wanted to make sure we got this out, this second one, because I did talk about the first one, so this is great. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric, for having me. I appreciate it so much. It's super fun.
Yeah, and it's great to see you again. It's been far too long. So besides number 3 in the series, what else do you have coming down the pipeline that you can talk about?
A few more things for Light in the Attic. I probably shouldn't talk specifics about it yet, but there's a few things non-Japanese. But But yeah, just exploring music and doing through DubLab, film. We're working on some film projects and doing a lot of fun kind of projects here in LA with Metro Art, as well as KCET TV and
Nice.
doing curatorial work and LACMA Museum here in LA. So just staying busy with music and juggling two children.
Yeah.
So who I think woke up from a nap, so I kind of got the nudge on that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're almost done on the album here, so yeah, I can let you go. But real quick, what's your favorite Beatles album? This was a question from the chat.
I would say my favorite Beatles album, mostly because of the experience I had with it on first listen, is Revolver.
Oh.
Also because of where it lays in their catalog of being a bridge between. I mean, Rubber Soul was before it, but it was you started to get a bridge of them getting really more experimental. So by the time that Tomorrow Never Knows kicks in at the end, a lot of the kind of backwards tracking tape and stuff like that. To me, that was I like pivot points and bridge moments for artists where you start to hear them reach new territory, but they're still that feet in different worlds. They're straddling sort of like limbo. And to me, that record was that sweet spot, but also just the experience I had as a listener. It was one of the most memorable music experiences I've ever had. And I remember getting it from the record store, putting it on the turntable, laying down, and having to just kind of play it in a loop over and over again.
Wow.
Over and over again, and just feeling, like kind of expanding out of myself, almost like astral traveling sort of thing. I just felt like it was such an expansive sonic experience, that it just blew my mind. So for me, that would be it. And I love the cover of it as well.
How old were you?
Also, I was a late bloomer in many ways, I think, with music. I think I was probably 18 when I probably heard bits from it before, I imagine. But at 18 years old, when I got into college radio, I started buying records. And to me, that was an important kind of record that changed a lot of my outlook on sound. So yeah, that was mine.
Cool.
What's your favorite?
I always go back to for the longest time it was the White Album, but ever since I sort of dissected Abbey Road for myself, I'm starting to warm up to Abbey Road.
It's like I said, it's like children, it's you can't pick a favorite. It's just have important moments with each of them.
Yeah.
I think catalogs of bands, we all as humans, our perspectives change. So
yeah, I mean, I still haven't found someone who really loves Beatles for sale, though. If you can find them, let me know. But that always seems to be the odd child. So.
They could be on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I know you got family to take care of, but thank you again for hanging out with me and the chat. And thank you for putting these beautiful comps together. So
My
cool.
pleasure. Thanks for listening and supporting it, Eric.
Yeah, of course. All right. Until next time.
All right.
Take care.
Out there in the world. Bye.